Okay, everyone, it's about that time, 11:15, so we'll go ahead and get started. This is the Creating Presence workshop session, and I am Kate Miller, and I was scheduled to do this with my colleague Sarah North, and she is ill today, so I'm going to give this my best shot. She usually takes like the first chunk of it, so bear with me here, but I know we're going to get through, and hopefully you'll find this to be beneficial to you. So the agenda here, I want to talk a little bit about the background of this process, and we'll have a quick presence discussion and what is presence, what does it mean, what should you be thinking about. But then I wanted to dive in with all of you today about the format and process that Sarah and I took this past spring semester with various groups of faculty members. We had 4 total sessions on creating presence in your course, and one of those sessions was a virtual session, so that was an interesting experience. But I wanted to share that with you, and I hope you find it beneficial, because the way that Sarah and I, and I'll get to this, kind of created this idea, this concept, certainly it's not our concept, but the delivery of it, we wanted to get a little more creative. And, but here I am going into it, and I told myself I wouldn't. But anyway, we'll talk about that, and I hope that you find that helpful, and I hope to get some feedback from all of you, too, around that area. I want to talk with you about the feedback that we've received from our faculty that have gone through this workshop as well, your peers, and then looking at next steps. What do we plan to do with the information that we gleaned from the 4 sessions that we had this spring? And then we'll have some time just for reflection and action here. So the background of this particular Teaching Presence series was born at CU Online. The idea of it, not the concept itself, but the idea of how we were going to present this to our faculty members. Started brewing in spring of 2016, so about a year ago. And it's based on the community of inquiry model. This model explores social, cognitive, and teaching presence and how they all blend together to create that true educational experience for the student. So we wanted to base our delivery on that particular model. And I have a list of resources on the research. If there is interest around that, I can certainly share that. We share that with all of our participants in the workshop. And then this particular series offered an opportunity to present the training in a new way. So we actually, we're CU Online. We always advocate technology, academic tools, but we took the approach with these sessions, very low tech. And we did that by design in an effort to get more feedback, more collaboration from our faculty participants. So, as I mentioned, this concept is based on the community of inquiry. And of course, we're in higher ed, the idea of coming together with thought, the idea of coming together with collaboration, the idea of having a professor that gives us all the information and helps us connect all of the dots. This is the community of inquiry. This is teaching presence, cognitive presence, and social presence. And the idea with social presence is the ability, as it states here, of the learners to project their personal characteristics into the course, into the content, into their interaction with their peers through this collaboration. So here, you're moving from that surface level of socio-emotional to a deeper educational purpose. So, we all maybe do introductions. I'm Sally, and I like to go hiking and running on the weekends. That's great, okay, but how can we integrate how you are learning, Sally, in this course to not only benefit yourself, but also to socially connect you to your peers so that we're driving deeper into that centerpiece, that educational experience. With the cognitive piece, the extent to which participants in a community of inquiry are able to construct that meaning through sustained communication. So we all have perhaps those exams that asks you to just regurgitate the information or recall the information, and it's great, that's wonderful, that's a great way to assess. But thinking more on that cognitively deeper level, in the sense that not only do you understand the concept, but now you're teaching your peers. Now you're helping them understand this concept through your knowledge and your understanding of the content, and how cognitively you are digesting that information and sharing it with your peers. So in a sense, combining the social piece and the cognitive piece. And then coming together to create that circle, we have the teaching presence. Now, I think in the online environment, it may be a little bit more challenging. What does teaching presence mean? How does one accomplish this? I think it seems so obvious in a face-to-face course. Well, I stand up there and I'm present and I'm here for my students. But are you really there to help them think about, this is how you need to maneuver through the course? It's a beautiful thing, I think, when the instructor can help be more of a facilitator of information for their students. The students are learning from one another. They're exploring, discovering together. They are trying to decipher the information that their leader, their professor, is giving them and guiding them through all of these different spheres. But it's the instructor who sets up the course, who decides on the material, who helps facilitate those discussions, who posts those deep dive questions for their students. So that's their presence. That's how they're injecting themselves into the course. They're there and they look for those key moments to interject themselves into the course in an effort to really highlight those pieces of the content that the student needs to be aware of. So what I want to do now is show you a Venn diagram here where we just spoke about the social, cognitive, and teaching presence. And here are some different thoughts and different categories that fall underneath each one of these categories. This is not an exhaustive list. This is information that we gleaned from the research, from the community of inquiry research. And these are just suggestions and ideas. They're very, I would say, vague and very kind of just these 1 to 2 word descriptives on purpose, as to not necessarily keep you in a cage, if you will, as this is exactly how you do teaching presence. This is exactly how you achieve cognitive and social presence. But it's rather these ideas of combining units and portions of each one of these to, again, move to that center piece, that educational experience that students look at and that they want to experience when they're in your course. And oftentimes, some of these things can be very obvious, some of these things are not as obvious, and some of these things you're already doing, and you may not know that this is actually a social component of your course. Creating that safe environment, well, of course you want to create that safe environment, but actually saying that, actually making that known to your students, that this is an environment where we want you to share ideas, to feel safe to do so, that in itself is very powerful to make that social connection, that this is an environment that I can feel free to express my ideas, of course to an extent, but it oftentimes goes without saying, but sometimes saying it makes it that more present. So these are just some thoughts here. I'm sure perhaps you've glanced over it, but that teaching piece, that's you, that's the faculty. You're designing it. You are kind of posting that direction for the course and really thinking about the development and the delivery of the course and materials. You're being thoughtful. You're being aware of how your students are going to receive this information. And then really that social and cognitive piece, I almost look at that more as the student component, those two pieces. And then again, this teaching is you're just interjecting yourself. You've set the tone in both of those areas, but the social and cognitive areas are a beautiful way for your students to be able to express themselves in their learning as well. So when we had these sessions in the springtime, like I said, we had 4 of them, and one of them was online. We had one at the medical campus, we had 2 downtown Denver, and 1 online. And when I showed you that initial screen of the kind of the definition, the broad definition of each of the presence areas, what we would do at that point in time is allow instructors to think about how they're already achieving those areas. And by design, we had a very loose definition, much like I showed you up there, in a way to kind of get them thinking about, well, how am I doing social? How am I doing cognitive? How am I present as a teacher in my course? And then I've got a few pictures here, but we wanted to create that collaborative environment for them to share those ideas. So much like we ask students to share ideas, we kind of wanted to flip that on the professors that attended our training in the spring and get them to share ideas. We are hoping at CU Online that this new format of leaning more on our instructors to provide us feedback on what's working in their course, what's not working in their course, will lend insight into how we can help train our faculty members even better, because we're hearing from faculty themselves as to what they'd like to learn as it relates to this particular area. But it's very faculty-centered, and we were very reliant on the faculty. And again, we offered at both the Denver and Anschutz Medical Campus. And it was focused on these outcomes of, how are we going to achieve this in our course? What are we going to do that will differentiate each one of these categories, yet bring them together to create that experience? But I found it interesting, and I have to think back about how we marketed this, because it was kind of a surprise, because we had said we're going to learn about teaching presence. What does that mean? What does this broad theoretical approach to teaching mean? But our purpose in that was to really get kind of these green, organic responses from faculty. But I think they were thinking they were going to come and we would be spewing out ideas on how they can achieve this in the course. But in flipping that, we got a really good sense of what they're comfortable with, what they want to do in their course. And it was very intriguing to see the differences both downtown and then as well as at our medical campus, because some things that work downtown simply were not even fathomable on our medical campus. So that was interesting too. So it was a way for us to get information from faculty, but we were curious how this would work, because we were worried that we might offend faculty or make them mad that they weren't going to get the information that they needed right then and there, but it was designed as such. So I want to talk about the format and process with you, because these are your peers, and I want to also, if you have any thoughts too on areas that you'd like to learn more about. But our first workshop, as I said, Denver campus, and we had a various faculty representation: business, public affairs, arts and media, psychology, library. And then, of course, we had both online and face-to-face formats. So just because you're teaching face-to-face doesn't mean these can't apply to you, of course, in that environment as well. And then conversely, we had at the medical campus, pharmacy, nursing, and dentistry. So some of the takeaways, I think, was that we needed this diverse audience. It lends itself to well-rounded results. So we need you to participate, and we need to hear from your varying viewpoints. And then, of course, it benefits both online and face-to-face instructors. So I wanted to show you the setup, because I think it's important to note, because usually at CU Online, we're in rows and we're all facing the front, much like we are today, and we're glancing at a PowerPoint. But what we did is decided to have these kind of clusters of tables, if you will. And then, as I had mentioned, this was very low tech. So we provided sticky notes and poster board for the faculty to work on, but to observe them thinking about ideas about how they're already achieving these methods in their course. But then after showing them that Venn diagram of a few examples of how you can achieve this in your course, the dialogue expanded and they got to thinking more about what would work. We had offered up the suggestion of using emoticons in your course, downtown Denver. And that was accepted. That was okay, that's interesting. I think there's a time and place for it, but that's very interesting, and I might consider using emoticons in my course to kind of build that social interaction. But it was very frowned upon at our medical campus. It was something that I simply wouldn't want to use that. That's very unprofessional, and these are potential doctors, colleagues that I might be researching with, working with. That's not to say that doesn't happen on the Denver campus. It was just an observation with these two groups that emoticons would simply not work. So that was intriguing for us to know that this is just something we're uncomfortable with, and we were so happy to hear that. But this group setup provided that opportunity for that collaborative learning. And hey, I'm doing it this way, I'm doing it that way. Have you considered this? So that was helpful too for their peers to understand what their fellow instructors are doing in their course. And then of course this idea of minimal activities. This is just a close-up of kind of the few iterations that we went through on how are we going to display this. We wanted faculty to get the idea of how does this all come together? How can I pull something from social, cognitive, and teaching and make for this educational experience? What does that look like? Not all activities in your course, not all content pages in your course are going to encompass all three of these items. But the idea here is that you're thoughtful, you're aware, you're cognizant that this experience relies on all of these components. But it's not to say that every single thing you post in your course needs to encompass these. It's an overarching concept and idea. And here are word clouds from our workshop 1 and workshop 2. And my apologies for not having the word clouds or information from our virtual session and our workshop 4, but I can definitely share that with you because that was an experience. But some of the things you'll see here, this workshop 1 and workshop 2, some that jump out at me is this idea of we want more information on discussions. We think that's a great way to provide that social interaction and the feedback. That's a great way for me, the instructor, to be present. I'm providing that feedback to my students so that they're aware of what's going right, what's going wrong, but also the concept of the project and the groups and giving that background on who am I, the instructor, your leader for this semester? Who are you, the students, the ones that you'll be learning from the most? And we understand that not all courses are set up in such a way that this will lend itself as being a resourceful tool. But again, it's about you, the instructor, being aware that this is a very powerful combination to help with student success. But these particular word clouds are going to be very helpful for us, Sarah and I, as we explore the idea of presenting very pointed sessions come fall of 2017 around social, cognitive, and teaching. So Sarah and I have plans to offer 3 very specific sessions under each one of these categories. So again, we will kind of discover and reassess this idea of presence, what it means. But then we want to have very tailored sessions underneath each one of those categories. And those sessions will be determined based on this feedback that we received from faculty that have attended the sessions that we have provided to them. So we've had overall excellent feedback. The enrollment is growing for these particular sessions. But again, I'm kind of curious, and I thought about today having all of us come together and work on the Venn diagram together and thinking of ideas of what we're already accomplishing in our course. But the room didn't really lend itself to such an activity. But for today, I wanted to share this with you so that you could understand what we've been up to and introducing this idea of presence and what if you wanted to share what it means to you too, because I think it's great that it means so many different things to different faculty, and that's what's going to make it beneficial come fall. And we would love to have anyone that's interested in any one of these topics, if they feel that they're on target with some of these areas, such as discussions, groups, feedback, group projects, creating kind of this virtual self, creating that presence. How are you doing that? Are you doing a video of yourself? Are you doing more of imagery? So these are all very helpful tools in creating that presence. But we want to dive even deeper into those to really pinpoint how one can achieve that. And then potentially looking at the data behind that to see how has this been beneficial? I would love to make kind of a study out of this and have that control group of courses where they thoughtfully and methodically add in various components of teaching presence, and then we can monitor and see if there is that sense of accomplishment based on the tactics that are put in place by the faculty member. So as I had said, we want to add additional trainings and workshops around this collaborative model. And I don't know if anyone would care to share if they feel that this works or if it's like, no, we come to training so that we can be taught and so that we can learn from you versus us collaborating. I just think it's an interesting take on our trainings, and we hope to implement this model a little bit more come fall, not only with this Teaching Presence series, but also with our Canvas Basics and our Canvas for power users and more of our advanced training. So we hope to see more of this kind of design, if you will, in our trainings. We definitely need more time for our sessions. We were running way over our hour and a half. Again, just based on the conversation. Sometimes you think, gosh, I don't really want to talk. I don't want to share what I'm doing in my course. But once you start on that topic and you do it more in the approach of, what are you doing? You don't have to share with your peers, just put it on a sticky note. And then offering up what the research has suggested, it becomes a more comfortable conversation to have. At least that's what we were able to determine from our session. And then the online and virtual sessions, if I may, just take a moment to discuss that. That was an interesting way of doing it. We had a few requests to offer this series online. And us being CU Online, we naturally had to rise to the occasion and find a way to do this virtually. And we utilized Zoom, and it was a nice, hearty audience that we had. And we decided to set up different groups in Zoom, so you can use Zoom to set up groups, and we had them work independently, much like we have face-to-face, and they had their own whiteboard in their room, in their Zoom room, and they shared ideas and concepts, and then we came together, and we used a Google Doc to house all of the information, and we generated a word cloud too, and everyone had their moment in time, and then they could talk and share their thoughts. So I think we're going to try this again, and we're going to use Zoom and hopefully make these trainings a little more accessible to our faculty moving forward. But we could see each other, we could hear each other, we could share screen. So it was a great way to do it, but very interesting in itself. So thank you for joining today. I would like to put actually back on the screen these thoughts and ideas here. If there are any questions, we have, I think, a few more minutes together here. If there are any questions around this, thoughts on the style of the presentation or the format, or anyone want to share maybe how they're already achieving some of these areas? Or not, it's fine. Karan?
I like to share the idea about thinking about perspective taking. I like the idea about having a collaborative piece to share ideas. I think that's incredibly helpful. Mm-hmm. I think social presence is important in my class, and I would hope that my students think the same thing. But I would like to see them doing the same kind of thing that we would be doing as faculty.
Okay.
To find out what their perspective is. Is it important? Is it not important? And, do they want to cut to the chase? Do they want to get rid of all the pictures and,
yep.
Blow it up on their phone? Mm-hmm. What they need to do, what they need to read and be done.
Yeah. That's a really good point, because I've started on focus groups, student focus groups, to help CU Online understand maybe what technologies we need to help implement. What areas do we need to help our students understand when it comes to learning online? And I've started with one group, and I met with them, student government, and there was some interesting feedback around what online learning means to them. And again, this was a very small group, and they're not necessarily the voice of the campus, but there were some in the group that they just want to take an online course, get in there, do the assignment, be done, get the grade. And that's fair. But that is a really good question, and maybe even a session to consider, because you're probably thinking as a faculty member, well, gosh, I put all this work into this, and my students don't even seem like they're interested in participating in this. Or I may have put a discussion as a way to socially engage with my students. There's no points attached to it. I just want to get to know them, want them to get to know their peers, but no one posted to the discussion because there was no points. There was no skin in the game for them. So why would they just decide to post? So it is about what can we learn from the students to help inform us how we should be designing our courses. That's not to say they have the final say in how we're building our courses and what content we have in our courses. That would be ridiculous. But the idea is, what should I have in my course in order to be most effective with my students? So while these are concepts, ideas, guiding directives, it's very much what feels comfortable for me? I've maybe been teaching this course for several semesters. Maybe I've assessed my students in the middle of the term to kind of get an idea and a feel for what's working, what's not working. And then I pivot and I modify as needed. But hopefully this idea provides kind of a roadmap to get you thinking about what works in my course. Maybe social doesn't work in your course, and that's okay. But getting just a different way of thinking about your teaching, that you don't have to be the one just standing up there and giving out all this information. Your students are there too, and they can very much be used in that capacity as well. So thank you for that, Karan. Yes?
Can you share some ideas of what things came out often about how faculty made a presence in their online courses?
Well, going back to the word clouds, that basically encompassed all of the thoughts. So those with the larger, let me see if I can make this bigger.
But were they doing that video or announcements?
Right. The primary mode of presence that faculty most commonly used is video. So they would record themselves, a video introduction of themselves. They would utilize announcements, and instead of typing out the announcement, they would use a video to make an announcement for the week to continue that connection with their course. What I would like to do, because video does seem, it's like, well, sure, that seems a little obvious that you can see my face so that I'm present in your online course. But what I would like to do is kind of dig a little bit deeper, and what does that mean? What more can we do with that? Video is a great resource. It's been shown to be engaging and help engage, especially those larger courses, to help them feel like I see my instructor, I see my peers, I feel connected to the course. It's very powerful. But I'd love to move past that, because that was the primary response when it came to how do I create that social presence. When it came to the instructor presence, it was really geared a lot toward the content that they put in their course. So they try to be really thoughtful about what they want the students to glean from their particular course. So I found that very intriguing, that they don't just haphazardly put content in. And this particular group of instructors that we were chatting with, they do modify their content. They do assess their students. They're not overhauling their course every semester, but they are taking note of what's working with their students and what's not. So the content was a big piece of that teaching presence. That's how they felt that they were present. But the feedback too. So the content and then the feedback. That was their way to feel that they were present in the course. They're providing feedback. They're letting the student know what they did right, what they did wrong, and here's how you can improve. So that was something that we gleaned. And then kind of this cognitive piece, a lot of them deferred to group work. So that was their response for achieving cognitive presence for their students, is allowing them to work in these groups and providing an opportunity for the instructor to kind of mediate and facilitate. But the students themselves, they found that to be a great way to achieve that cognitive piece, where they're working together, they're learning together, and someone usually takes the lead and helps facilitate that of the student group as well. So, but there's so many different options that one can utilize in their course, as we saw from that Venn diagram. So I think that these are the standards that most people go to, and rightfully so. We also teach this and train this in our basics, in our power users, and most of our training. Use video, chunk content, make sure it's relevant, make sure you can tie it to outcomes for your course. So it all makes sense that they would say this, but I would love to maybe dive a little bit deeper into these thoughts and ideas. I mean, some of them connecting ideas. Well, sure, of course we already do that. We already achieved that. But how are you doing that? Really being able to pinpoint, this is how I'm doing it. This is how I'm connecting those ideas. This is how I am the instructor connecting the ideas. This is how my students are connecting the ideas. So I think being able to point to those sections of the course makes it that much more powerful. Because if I were to say, who's connecting ideas in their course? Well, everyone would probably raise their hands. But okay, how are you doing that? That might be a little bit more challenging. So, well, I thank you very much, and I would love to hear any feedback you have. I think everyone has a feedback form, which I've been forgetting to give out to people in my last 3 sessions. So, but if you have thoughts about this approach, and if you, a faculty member, would find this beneficial, That would be really helpful for me to know. And any topic ideas that you'd love to drill down into come fall, that would be helpful for us as well as we start to offer very pointed sessions around social cognitive and teaching. So thank you. Thank you all.